Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Wallerton and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week I have the pleasure and the privilege to interview someone influential, exciting, extraordinary from the industry. And this week is no different. We have Richard Jones, who is CEO at Wayin. We are on a Zoom call here. So hi Richard, how are you doing?
Hi Tom, yeah, doing very well, thanks.
And you can hear me okay?
I can indeed, yeah.
Fantastic. I need to do a quick shout out to our office, which is this time next year in Leighton, who provides space for us to record the podcast. So thanks to you guys. So, Richard, for people who don't know you and don't know the business, could you give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the CEO of Wayin, as you said, and basically Wayin is a company that has built a software as a service platform for non-technical marketers to be able to create a range of interactive experiences that offer consumers a value exchange in return for learning about them and collecting data and marketing opt-ins. We've been going about 8 or 9 years. The technology in the company actually comes from the UK. We were founded in the UK under a different banner, a different name. We were called Engage Sciences back then. And then we did a reverse merger with a US company that was called Wayin, and I then moved to the US to run the combined entity. And,
so Richard, sorry, can I take you back one step there? So you say you're a SaaS platform for non-tech marketers, a value exchange between brands and their audience. Do you have I know what that means. Could you give a super plain English version of that?
I'll give you an example of a campaign.
Excellent.
It was done on our platform by one of our customers, just to illustrate kind of what we do. So one of our customers, Air New Zealand, they were looking to highlight routes into the US that they were flying to and capture data on travelers that were buying air tickets into the US from APAC. And so they used our platform to run a campaign called What Makes You Say Yay to the USA. And essentially, this is an interactive experience where you, as the consumer, basically can swipe through a bunch of different things that are showing you stuff that you can experience in the US in different locations, but not telling you what locations they are. So, for example, showing you 10 different types of food or 10 different types of nightlife, 10 different types of cultural experiences that you can have. And you're basically swiping and clicking on what appeals to you from those choices. And at the end of that experience, it says, hey, your perfect destination based on your inputs is New Orleans or New York City or whatever it may be. Would you like tickets for you and 3 friends would you like to win tickets for you and 3 friends to go to New Orleans? If so, fill in your details, answer a few questions, marketing consents collected, etc.
Where are you hosting this? Is this in social or just a display unit?
Great question. So yeah, it can be embedded into multiple different destinations. This particular campaign, Air New Zealand embedded it into their Adobe-powered website. They embedded it inside a Google double-click ad unit, so you can have that interactive experience inside the ad unit without having to click out to the website. Plus, they embedded the experience in the travel section of a local New Zealand media partner. So that's how they got the distribution of the campaign. And this is essentially, think of this as a little embeddable interactive application. And then how the sort of campaign actually flows is they had over 100,000 people enter that experience across those 3 different destinations. And then basically at the end of the campaign, we then passed the data through to Air New Zealand's email platform, which happened to be Adobe Campaign, I believe, which triggered a personalized email going out to people saying, hey, you didn't win, but here's a 5% discount code if you book tickets to your perfect destination of New Orleans inside the next month. They made $5 million of bookings from that one email. But of course, that's not the real benefit. The real benefit is that you've got 100,000 richly profiled consumer records that where you've got real information about what type of traveller people are, their motivations, desires, interests, and that can be used to personalise further marketing offers and personalised marketing, beyond the initial campaign.
So that's an excellent overview of the product, don't you? That's massively clear. So I think we're going to come back to that. Your shiny new object, I think, sort of will steer us back in that direction. So let's get to know you a bit. It's so weird saying that not face to face, but anyway, we're doing it. So what is the most useful thing that you've bought for work? So you pay with your own money. So you sounds like you started in the UK, then you've been dragged somewhere glamorous, I hope, in the US as part of this reverse merger. But what along the way have you spent your own hard-earned cash on that you use for work?
Yeah, and funny enough, it's got to do with the glamorous destination, if you can call it that I ended up in. So Wayin had their headquarters in Denver, and I got out to Denver 3 years ago and realised everyone had beards, plaid shirts, and baseball caps. And I went and bought the full gear, grew a beard. But actually, the thing that was most useful was actually the baseball cap that I bought. And funny enough, I've wore this baseball cap now. I've become completely native. I wear this baseball cap every time I go on stage, every time I go to a conference, every time I'm doing anything. This is a podcast, you can't see it. But weirdly enough, that actually has become extremely useful because it's given me a bit of personal branding. And, I can be at conferences and people know who I am because I'm the bloke with the baseball cap on. So it's just really proven to me that never feel like you need to, conform as a corporate executive. Wearing the same old crap as everybody else just makes you invisible.
I had I don't wear a baseball cap, but I remember being on stage fairly early on in my career, and I was wearing a suit jacket, a shirt, blue jeans, and brogues, and I looked down the panel, and everyone was wearing exactly the same thing, and I thought, oh my god. And now I just dress like a tramp, which is kind of embarrassing. But so what's on the baseball cap?
Well, I wear a number of different baseball caps, but for a while, the one I was wearing was actually a female baseball cap by the yoga brand Prana. And I must have wore that in about 150 videos and 150 stage performances. So I feel like I should have got some sort of sponsorship from Prana.
And the beard, did that stay?
That is stayed, yeah. I don't think that's ever coming off now. I've got too used to it.
But I guess you didn't pay anything for the beard. Okay, so that's the most unusual answer I've had to that question, but brilliant. So outside of baseball caps and beards, what new belief or behaviour has changed your work life in the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, so the thing that I've really tried to do, so my job is a pretty stressful job. You've got a lot of ups and downs you have to deal with. You've got all the people issues, business issues, all the rest of it, and it can be very, very stressful. And I think the thing that I've learned from a behaviour perspective that's had the biggest impact is that you really have to make space for getting outside and getting some exercise, even if it's just for 20 minutes every day, to clear your head. And if you do that, your productivity, your clarity of thought, your stress levels, everything improves. And so currently what I'm doing is I'm cycling, 5 miles to work and 5 miles back. And that just gives me 25 minutes out in the fresh air, get the exercise going, and you whatever happens, you're in work, you get to work more relaxed, you leave work, you get to home more relaxed, whatever happened during the day. And it's really indispensable, I think, for being operating well in a stressful environment.
I'm going to admit something quite embarrassing, but for my 40th birthday, my partner bought me a electric skateboard, which was a lot of fun, but I've fallen off it so many times. I thought, as a new parent, I really need to stop doing this. So I've now downgraded to just a normal skateboard. So that is now, that's my equivalent now. I've got like a 20-minute skate to and from work. And
there's nothing embarrassing about that at all. I've been looking at the one-wheel kind of electric, so kind of in between a hoverboard and an electric skateboard. And I've been looking at that. In fact, I actually mentioned it Francesca, my marketing director, that I was looking at buying this, and she told me I was too old to be
You're not too old to buy one, but I might argue you're too old to fall off it, which is an absolute guarantee. So,
I'm sure.
but I think I don't know, it depends where you live. If you live on the sort of beautiful coastline with lots of boardwalk or whatever, brilliant. But if you're trying to get around the knobbled streets of Leighton, then I would suggest it's not the world's greatest idea. So moving on from electric transport. So you're the CEO of a successful tech company, fantastic, but I'm assuming at some point, some year gone by, you've made a couple of fuck-ups, but which is the really bad fuck-up that you look back on now and think, I'm so glad that happened?
So I've actually made, it's not a couple of fuck-ups, it's a couple a week, if not a day. That's all part and parcel of actually trying to move things quickly. You will make mistakes, and you have to have the self-awareness to own them, understand them, and change and adapt. And I think that does come with experience and maturity. But some of the biggest fuck-ups I've made have been the ones that have sort of crept up on me. And there hasn't been a sort of single point where you can go, oh, well, that was the fuck up. It's gradual sort of changes in people's behaviour or attitudes or things that you've done, which sort of creep up on you, and you realise that actually in total that was a really big fuck up. And actually, the one that I look at as being the biggest fuck up that I've had in recent years is losing a certain amount of focus in the business because of allowing your top salesperson to become too influential inside the company. And it actually in a tech, I mean, I think it can happen in any company, but in a tech company, you can have disastrous mistakes that can come out of that, because one of the things that salespeople, really good salespeople have to be, is they have to be very, very singular-minded. These are lone wolves that plough quite a lonely furrow, but the really good ones are very, very singular, very, very singular-minded, fight their corner, and they try and get everybody to support them in what they're doing to make them the most successful. And that's expected behaviour of salespeople, given the focus of their role. But if you allow one individual to become too influential, they then can start having more of an impact that they need to be on things like your roadmap. And that singular focus of salespeople actually doesn't give them the broad appreciation of actually what is best for the company across everything that's going on. And so you do really have to, even if you've got a fantastic superstar salesperson absolutely smashing it and doing really, really well, you have to rein in their influence inside the company, because what's good for them is what's good for the next deal, not necessarily good for what the whole company is trying to do over the long term. They also tend to be very short-termist in their thinking. It's what's the next quarter, what's the last conversation I've had, it's the top priority. So you really got to make sure you split those lines up, not having your top salespeople getting too close to your chief product officer or your CTO. Have those lines of control, those lines of separation, so that you can make decisions in the best possible way. So
how do you incentivize your salespeople to not do that? Because there's one thing that the commission-based lone wolf character out there, she's winning business, whatever it is. But one school of thought should be that the salesperson's reward should be tied exactly to the business's performance, so therefore that problem doesn't exist. Or is that me being a bit rose-tinted glasses about the sales profession?
Yes, I think maybe that's going to be wonderful if it did work like that. But of course, the salespeople are driven. They're targeted on a personal target, not a company target. And you have to do that in order to be able to reward good salespeople and chastise and replace bad salespeople. So they don't work to a company target; they work to a single target. And that is the root of what drives them as people. You tend to get folks that move into that role because they do like operating, with their own targets as a lone wolf, proving how great they are as an individual. That tends to be the psychology of a salesperson. So I think the way to handle it is not to change the compensation culture within sales, but really just to make sure that you have very clear lines of separation around job roles. And actually, you have very structured processes for collecting information from the field in terms of priorities, as well as customers and the rest of it, and proper checkpoints in terms of, reviewing that information, balancing it, and then making decisions. And I think with the startups, a lot of those lines, because you're smaller teams and you're moving very fast, a lot of those lines get blurred, and you aren't so structured in your processes and your thinking, and that's where you can have these issues of where some people get too influential outside of the area that they should, the lane that they should stay in, and you have to watch that, and you have to watch how decisions and information is being passed across the company. Larger companies, it's much easier to do that. And so obviously, as we've grown as an organisation and become much larger, being able to control some of those personalities has been much, much easier.
Well, I really appreciate your candidness about that, and sort of giving us an insight into what sounds like a relatively recent headache for you. That honesty is fantastic. So, to move away from that, as much as I really would love to dive into the detail, but it's probably not applicable for this podcast. But so you're talking about people at the top of their game, high performing salespeople. But what advice do you have for people at the other end of their careers? So these are the students that are coming out of uni, they want to get into ad tech. What advice would you give to a driven student who really wants to make their way in this industry?
Definitely is go and find somewhere where you can do work experience or an internship, even better. That is the route in. That's the route into any kind of business. But certainly it's been a very effective route in to our company. We have had a number of people on work experiences. We continue to do that. We have a number of people that, we've always got people coming in on internships. And I think we've hired every single person that's done an internship with us, bar one. And those employees are still with us. They have great tenure. They've become fantastic members of the company culture. It's hard to say whether those people would have actually got a job had they, done the sort of traditional university milk round. The fact that they came in and did work experience and internships and got to know the team, we got to know them, just made it much easier. We never went out and put these people against other people against the milk round. We just, when you finished university, come back, you're hired. So that would definitely be my route.
So I saw a tweet last time the A-level results came out, and I'm sorry, the person who wrote it, I can't remember it exactly, but it said something along the lines of, you don't need better grades. What you need is parents who live near London so they can support you whilst you do your internship. You don't need better grades, you need better parents, which I thought was which is quite amusing. And so how does a student do an internship if they don't live in London?
That is definitely an issue, because obviously the majority of the internships are where the big companies are, or where the majority of work opportunities lie. And obviously London's a big part of that. If you're doing an internship with us, you can either do it in Oxford or London, but that's the only places we've got offices. You got to find yourself there and be supported. So yeah, that is a concern. But then again, you've got to make choices in your life, and you've got to put yourself out there. And
even if that means camping in Hackney at the weekend.
Yeah, stay around friends, stay around aunts. 6 weeks in summer is definitely worth doing. And the only thing to watch out about, there's a bit of a funny story. One of our interns, Jess, who's now been full time with us for a number of years. I hope she won't mind me saying this. We work with the University of Sussex, and so we have interns regularly coming in from there during their kind of work year placements. And she worked with us for a year, very successful, and she'd gone back to university for a year, and the university wanted to promote the internship program, so they sent a photographer into the office where she was working before she left took some photos of her, in the work environment, smiling, etc. And then they had a big set of posters and handouts and stuff all around the university where the title was "Get Ahead in Business with an Internship." But of course, what happened? Some of the cheeky students got up to the poster and crossed out the A, and I don't think that's the message they were trying to send.
Wow, blimey. Right, well, there's some advice to be taken there at least. So,
never trust a media department.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted on interns actually, because I think that there's this idea that internship is hard for the reasons that I just articulated. But actually, in a lot of creative professions, there's no such thing. Like if you're a comedian or a musician or a poet, there's potentially never any money at any point in the career, but yet people still kind of make it through and survive that. So I'm a bit like, in some ways, having a really low paid internship job in London is amazing. At least you're getting some money, whereas the majority of creative industries don't support anyone at all. So I'm a bit torn there. But anyway, it's not about me, it's about you. So we've talked about a few different things, but before we go into your shiny new object, how do you want people to remember your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, funny enough, when I kind of really think about that, I think more about the employees and colleagues that I've worked with over the course of the career, more than I do kind of how successful I was or anything like that. For me, it's more like I would be very happy if all the colleagues and employees that had worked with me over the years were able to look back at the time that they spent working with me very fondly as both the best and worst of times. And I say that because if you are really invested in what you are doing, if you really are truly invested in the mission of what the company is trying to achieve and the community of fellow people that you're working with as a team in order to try and achieve those goals, you are going to have highs and lows, and it's going to be thrilling and exhilarating and exciting, and it's going to be times where you're going to be exasperated and down on your luck and needing to be cheered up by others. But it's the rise and falls, it's the highs and lows, it's the team community that really makes business worthwhile. And I want people to remember that. Both being the most exciting, the best, the highs and the lows that they had in their career, because that shows that they were truly invested in what they were doing. And funny enough,
that sounds lovely, and I think that a lot of listeners would agree with that. So how do you as a CEO foster that team community, and how do you keep a team together during the lows and not let them spiral off into ego when they hit the highs?
Well, so firstly is what you do at a kind of corporate level, at a team level, and then what you do at an individual, because obviously everybody's different and they'll need different types of support when they're reacting to things that go well or go badly. But at a team level, we taken to heart David Novak, who's the founder of Young Brands, his book on recognition culture. And so,
what's the book called?
I just can't remember. But
okay, I'll look it up.
David Novak, Young Brands. Type in recognition into Google, it'll come up. And he's got this book about recognition culture, and it's a really very well written book. It really just highlights the fact that a lot of people think, oh well, let's just do this or do that or pay people more or whatever it may be. And actually, money and they're all great. They're all things that people obviously want out of their career. But more often than not, people just want to be recognised for the job that they're actually doing. And if you really build a recognition culture where you're encouraging people all the time to don't shout how well you did. And going back to that influential salesperson, that was their problem. They were always shouting how great they were. That's not about how great you are. It's about how other people helped you to become great, or helped you to deliver what you needed to deliver. And so we very much push that message of recognition.
So just go back one step. How describe that to me again? So you don't say to someone, "Look, you did amazing." You say, "You helped me do my job." Sorry, just clear that one up for me.
So the recognition culture is about encouraging all of your employees when something that they've done something good, something fantastic has happened. Rather than them go, "Hey, look how brilliant I am," they reach out and go, "This has happened. I have to thank this person and this person, this person for what they've done." So you're encouraging people to be selfless in how they talk about, the successes of the business. And there's a flip side to that in a recognition culture, which is also, once some things are going well and you're recognizing people and the team effort that helps deliver those things, when things go wrong, not to be to deliver blame culture, to understand that and have the self-awareness that we are all part of the mistakes as we are all part of the successes, and that's what essentially David Novak talks about.
Right, I will definitely be adding that to the reading list, which from doing this podcast is far longer than my lifetime will allow me to read. So right, we're roughly at the halfway mark. So it's shiny new object time. Your shiny new object, Richard, is personalization in the age of privacy, which is probably the most marketing sentence I've ever heard in my life. But could you explain that to someone who doesn't necessarily understand what all of those things mean together?
Definitely, yeah. So this is, by the way, I also think this subject is one of the most disruptive things that has hit marketing in decades. So drum roll, please. So essentially, to explain kind of what I mean, if you think back to January 2018, the year kicked off with Cambridge Analytica and the fallout from that scandal, combined with people starting to look at in detail about how abuses of privacy not only impact marketing but also impact democracy. Russian interference in the elections, all the rest of it. And Cambridge Analytica and Facebook were right at the heart of this gathering storm about people's privacy and how businesses and corporations and shadowy political groups were actually using consumer data. All the way through 2018, every single day, every single week, there was a new piece of content out there in all the press, on the TV, the rest of it, about this privacy battle that was essentially being played out in the press. 2018 ended with Facebook and Google massively under a lot of pressure, whether it be location data or their privacy rules, you name it. They've been brought up in front of Congress, in front of the EU. There was certain, the UK Parliament was doing its own investigation. So many different fronts around privacy. And then 2019 kicked off with basically the tech leaders trying to turn this around and become the face of this new age of privacy. And so Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, came out with his open letter in Time magazine calling for US federal privacy regulations to mimic GDPR in the EU. We had Satya Nadella talking about the need for global privacy regulations. You've had, and then very recently, the last week or so, we had Mark Zuckerberg, which I find incredible, standing up and trying to, say, oh, we need lots of government regulation around privacy, and we're going to be a privacy-first company and all the rest of it. And I'm like, what a turnaround a year makes. But tech leaders are really driving this privacy. Now, if you step back and go, well, what does this all mean for marketing? It becomes very, very, very disruptive. So marketing essentially has operated for a number of years now in what I call the third-party data economy. And to illustrate this, I'll give you a little story about an executive who will remain nameless, who was very high-powered executive at Unilever, and this was about 4 years ago now, or so, maybe 4.5 or something. And I met them at a conference, and I was talking to them about what we did, explaining how our platform is used to collect this data directly from consumers as they raise their hand and tell you about themselves. And halfway through my kind of elevator pitch, I was shut off and told, well, why do we need to know who our customers are? We don't need to know who our customers are. That's a yesterday's solution. We can just get all the data that we need from Facebook and their coterie of data partnerships to do micro-targeting of content and advertising at scale. We have no reason to know who our customers are. We can do it all through these third parties. I remember leaving that thinking, being very depressed and actually thinking, this can't be right. Why would companies, big global companies, abrogate their whole customer connection to third-party platforms that they have no control over, using data which is very untransparent in terms of how the opt-ins were collected and the rights, and this data being repackaged and resold across the marketing ecosystem and then being used for targeting of ads on Facebook and Google and stuff. None of it made sense, and I thought, well, let's just see how things roll out. Of course, Unilever now, like every other major company in the last 18 months or so, it's come out saying that they need 1 billion direct connections with consumers, and they're putting in data lakes and the rest of it, as all the companies are, to collect data around consumers. But this is a very new phenomenon, and I think we're moving from a third-party data economy, because Facebook and Google are shutting off access to these third-party data suppliers. Regulation around privacy is gathering pace. There's 5 states in the US that are now doing their own privacy regulations, and the US federal regulations will happen probably sometime after. You've got jurisdictions all the way around the world, from India and Japan, South Korea, that either implemented privacy regulations or are now debating it. This is a global wave. And the losers are all the people that have built up these third-party data pools that are used for driving personalized marketing. We've seen Privacy Data International and others essentially do legal action, or start a legal action against people like Axiom and Oracle, because they got the whole, and the people around data.com. There is the large agencies, they've all invested in buying all these third-party data sets and pooling them, and then suddenly they're under threat, can't really use these things anymore. It's hugely disruptive. And so I think as regulation tightens, and as consumer attitudes change about marketers that use data that they haven't explicitly said that they can use and that are snooping on them, are seen to be bad for brand reputation, we're moving into a first-party data economy. And it's hard to find anyone that isn't saying the same things over the last 6 months because of everything that's gone on around consumer privacy. So for marketers, now they have to look at, okay, what data do I own around consumers? How close are my connections to my customers? And how am I actually going to drive personalized marketing at scale in the future, when I can't just buy that data or rent that data and use Facebook and Google to do that mass targeting of content at personalized content at scale?
Okay, thank you for that. So, obvious question is, brands are realizing that they can't just go to a third party and pull in this data about their target audience. And you're saying they need to find a way to drive their own first party data. Either they have some or they don't. But fundamentally, it's still businesses understanding consumers. And the privacy thing is about literally that. It's about the consumer having control, understanding where their data is going. But it feels to me in some ways that marketers still have to do the same thing, which is somehow coerce or persuade their users to some level of transparency through T's and C's or whatever, to hand over their data. The end goal still seems to be the same thing, as opposed to having an open and honest discussion with the consumer to share their data so that they can then offer them a product or a service that was better than if they didn't?
Yeah, so it stripped back. Personalization has to, to deliver personalized marketing. You need to know something about the audience with which you're targeting your message, right? And that's how personalization operates. Of course, it's been wildly easy for marketers to do that in this era of the third-party data economy, where you just drink the Facebook Kool-Aid and say, you don't need to know who your customers are. Just use our data partnerships and our platform to decide your lookalike audiences and the attributes, etc., of the target audience, and then create your content, and we'll just target them. And then that's all you need to do. That is a wildly easier operating environment for marketers than a world which says, actually, you can't just buy this data, rent this data. You actually have to go and collect it from consumers, because you've got to do that for large businesses in particular. You have to do that at scale. So how do you do that? And that's the extremely disruptive thing that's hitting, I think, the heart of how marketing and advertising are going to evolve over the next few years.
So I'm assuming Wayin has an example for that, and we'll get to that. I think it's important that you share that. So what are going to be the important roles moving forward to try and help brands get the data that they need in order to deliver personalized advertising? Is this tech, or is it creativity, or is it both? Are we going to see a resurgence in the competition mechanic? Having been in social agencies for years, it was like the last protocol in some ways was, oh God, we'll do a competition if we have to. So how? I know you have a product that solves this, but what are the skill sets that people are going to need to help answer these questions?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and I actually, funny enough, I do think that the people that have grown up in the social space do have a role to play in helping their companies manage this transition, because anybody that's working in the social space is used to actually building connections with consumers and actually trying to, get information from a body of people and facilitate a community around their brand or their service. And they're useful skills. But I think there's a more fundamental question when you actually step back and look at this world and go, all right, so I now know I need to collect a lot of data directly from consumers. I need that first-party data. There's some simple things you can do, which is, well, let's pull what I already have. So let's take information from, my the POS systems or whatever to find out purchase history. Let's pull the data I have around, people interacting with my website, so web analytics and that type of stuff. There's certain elements of data that you can immediately start to pull to see kind of what the lay of the land is. But that's never going to be enough, because everybody's doing that. And that's just the very basic, let's get started. The way that you're going to differentiate is actually collect more than your competitor about the consumers that you're both targeting. And so very basic first-party data, name, address, email, web analytics, purchase history, that's not enough. That is absolutely not going to be enough. You're going to need to layer on and augment that data with information around their motivations, desires, and interests, and their preferences. And you're going to have to collect that data. And so you really need to step back and go, how am I going to collect that at scale? And that brings you immediately to what's the value exchange I'm going to offer consumers in return for their engagement, their data, their preferences, and their opt-ins. And that's the fundamental question. So you think about who has the skill set to do that in an organization. Absolutely, I do think the folks that have grown up in the social age, they're going to have a good view of being able to do that. But I also think it's just, holistically in the marketing department, being able to step back and really think about, we're moving from an age where if I create great content, then I've got all the targeting and all the third-party data in the world I need to get that content out to the right people at the right time. That world's ending. How are you going to tempt people to connect with you and give you their data in order for you to personalize your marketing? And that comes to a value exchange. So the sorts of things that are coming back are actually thinking about building experiences that actually, give something in return. And it doesn't have to be a reward, although the reward mechanic is obviously clearly important in this transformation. It can be unlocking content. It could be a great interactive experience that allows you to discover products, and you get value exchange within the experience. It could be, people love offers and discounts. So it could be, accessing special deals, VIP treatment. There's a whole variety of different ways with which you can give a value exchange to get that engagement and collect that data. And so for me, stopping, having empathy, thinking about the mind of the consumer as a brand marketer, and thinking about how you're going to tempt them to engage is the first step.
So I know that you guys have been playing in this space for a long time, and you gave me the brilliant New Zealand example at the start. So I can understand how that works for a travel brand. In that example, you would see that someone could tell you the kind of destinations that they were interested in, saying, "Oh, that's my kind of nightlife, or that's my kind of beach, or cocktail, or food, or whatever it is." And then if you capture that person's email address, then you can start to build a behavioral or an emotional view of that customer. Give me an example of a couple of other things where you've helped a brand create their own data that they could then own and use.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you a local customer to where I am based now in Denver, which I think is an interesting one, because we tend to work with quite a lot of very large businesses, big travel companies, CPG companies, sports and entertainment, traditional B2C marketing of a certain size. But I'll give you an example of a customer at the lower end of the sort of size of customer that we work with. So there's a brand called Bowtech here in Denver that makes archery bows, and they've got 7 brands underneath Bowtech of these different archery bows. And they're about $100 million in turnover, so they're at the smaller size of companies we work with. But they only have 3 people in their marketing department, and they were renting, banner ads on Google and other basic, advertising on Facebook, etc. That was the mainstay of their marketing, and they had a market research company that they were paying to go out and, call people up and find out information that would help, prioritize product development, content production, marketing messages, etc., etc. So a relatively traditional kind of marketing mix in the recent history. And they started working with us and took what we were saying about actually it is now this first-party data economy, and actually you need to think differently about how you drive personalization. And so they've been working with us a couple of years, and they've actually built up a database of about 450,000 people in the US that use these bows. And apologies for people that don't like hunting, but these bows are for hunting. And essentially, what that audience of 450,000 people is, that is the entire audience, they believe, in the US of everybody that has an interest in hunting with bows. And they have now got 140.
That is a lot of people running around America with bows, hunting boars and stuff, isn't it? It's quite a terrifying thought.
Well, I'm here in the Rockies. I tell you, this place is absolutely massive, and I can well believe it. I can
now see you with your beard and your hat and a bow and a laptop. That's my.
No, I haven't done it. I think you actually need to. I think you need to be pretty strong to operate these bows. So I've not gone and done it.
Apologies, I interrupted.
Yeah, no. So they built this audience, which is basically the audience of everybody that's involved in using these bows, and it's not just their audience; it's the audience of all their competitors. And so they've been creating interactive experiences. They're pushing out lots of different channels that are focused on the subject of archery and hunting. And so, different interactive experiences that help you find the best hunts or top tips for being able to do, how to look after your bow, things about kind of what cooking you should do when you're out there in the wilds, on a hunt. Loads of different interactive experiences that are helping people interact and connect, do your feedback loop, giving them information, unlocking content, etc. All about hunting. And then as part of that, they're asking questions with these experiences just to find out, do you own a bow at the moment? Or what manufacturer and make is it? What do you like about it? Is it the accuracy or the distance, et cetera, et cetera? And so they've now got this database of everybody that is involved in archery hunting and what products they use, whether it's theirs, their competitors, and what they like or they don't like about it. And it's so granular now. And they don't sell directly over the web. They sell through retail outlets across the US. And it's now so granular with these 144 profile segments of data against every profile in the database that when they have a new bow that hits a retailer in a particular location that has certain criteria around whatever it is, distance or accuracy or whatever, that maps to people that they know like that type of product and like those types of features that are in that area close to that retailer, and then they target them with like, hey, here's a 5% discount code if you go and test out the new bow. And they're driving people into the retail store. They own the database of customers in this market. None of their competitors do. And they're beating the market by 20% in terms of results. And that is all down to going into really embracing this first-party data economy. They've stopped buying ads on Google, total waste of time. They've cancelled a multiple six-figure market research agency contract because they can collect all this feedback data with polls and surveys and quizzes and all sorts of different things on these different channels. And their business is beating everybody else. And for me, that's the future. And they've only got 3 people in their marketing department. They'll create 7 to 10 experiences a week that they push out on, different channels such as ad units or embedded on websites or embedded into, media partners' destinations.
So, but what would happen in a European environment where that 450,000 database got massacred by a GDPR type legislation? Wouldn't that sort of be an issue for the brand?
So they built up that database in a world post GDPR. So what GDPR is an interesting thing, because what it's essentially done is people have had to worry about the data that they own at the point of time that GDPR became had the penalties, the enforcement in May of last year. That was the big issue. And so people had their databases and they couldn't prove that they collected consent in the right way and all the rest of it. And so they had to slash their databases and delete loads of data. And that's happened to lots and lots of businesses that operate in the EU. But that doesn't stop them now from going, well, actually, we are going to build out a database and we are going to collect the information that we need, and we're going to do it in a way that is transparent and complies with GDPR. And that's what we're doing with customers right across the EU. They're building out database of information from consumers in the right way. And you can do this very, very quickly. I mean, Quicken Loans is a company here in the US that I know about. That in the first 6 months of using Wayin, they collected 2 million new names into the database with opt-ins and a whole set of information about, profile information about their preferences and desires. These are significant volumes that happen very, very quickly.
So what I'm taking from this is there's a potential positive scenario for both the brands and the consumer here. And it's really refreshing to hear you talk about things like creating interactive experiences, that a rich digital experience created by a brand for a consumer for a value exchange, because that was really where digital was in some ways, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, when I worked at digital agencies, the brief was create a digital experience so that the consumer spends time with the brand. That was what it was about. And then that sort of got eradicated when social video or targeted social video became such a thing. So the social industry has been driven by creativity within video. Whereas I think what you're talking about now is what are those interactive experiences where it isn't just a kind of, one click and, you track how many seconds of the video they watch, but actually it's about creating an entertaining environment online, which I think is if you're right, and I think there's a lot of truth in what you say, that there's a more rosy future for for brands and consumers together online. So we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Richard. That was brilliant. And I can't get this idea of you on a electric skateboard with a bow and arrow and a beard and a baseball hat on my head. And I look forward to meeting you in person. But if there's someone else who is inspired by what you've said today, how would you like them to get in touch with you?
So the biggest thing that I would say is, test what I'm saying with the research that's out there, and there is a lot of research out there. So if you go onto the Wayin.com website, for example, we on our resources page, we have access to a number of different analyst reports where people like Forrester and others that you can download for free because we've got the distribution rights, where they're really attacking this major change, and different terminology. Forrester calls it zero-party data, which is this augmentation of first-party data where you're collecting this additional preference and motivations and desires, information around your consumers. But there's lots and lots of data there. So please go onto the Wayin website, go to the resources section, download those reports and see what the analysts have got to say around the subject.
And if someone wanted to get in touch with you directly, is that cool? Or would you rather?
Absolutely, love to. Yeah. You can ping me at richard@wayin.com, or fill out any of the forms on the website, and we'll gladly chat to you.
And that's wayin.com.
That's correct. Yes.
Richard, what an absolute pleasure! Thank you so much. I will see you next time you're in the UK, or when I'm in Denver. Who knows which will be first?
Excellent. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on, Tom.
Thank you.